All right, this is episode one of The Author's Perspective. Your host, Alan Garcia.
Jonathan Wilson.
Ejan Morales.
All right, and we will be discussing the effects or the effects of artificial intelligence on the modern author, how artificial intelligence becomes a tool that we shouldn't fear and instead employ towards our future as authors and creative writers. To begin this episode, we will be covering my story called Love, Patrick. This is a strong story about psychological horror. Patrick is a serial killer of women. I'll go ahead and read my rendition of it. Love, Patrick. Tonight he's brought home a new girl. Her name is Eva. After a night of candlelit rooms, pasta, wine, romance, and promises of eternal love, she's turned in. Naked, the white linen sheets press against her slender silhouette, painting her body a ghostly white, a wraith every man would die to be haunted by. She sleeps deeply, undisturbed by any noise or any light, or my presence, or even Patrick's whereabouts. He's a night owl by nature. At night, he heads down to his office in his basement to work on his novel, unbothered and alone. No one's allowed down there. I wasn't. Ava isn't. As a matter of fact, no one has ever been down there. Patrick sure does like to talk about it though. His L-shaped desk in the center of the room, adorned with 3 floating monitors, one for writing, another for music, and the last one for quick research. His rolling bar of expensive whiskey and scotch, the beige accented maroon walls, the hardwood floors, the sound deadening, the imported candelabra in the center to lock in theme. We dated for a couple of months before I got to see his office, one night, much like the one Eva had tonight. I remember suddenly opening my eyes to the sound of the steel table scooting slowly across the concrete floor, making an awful, pausing, grounding noise. I stood there watching as Patrick penetrated my body like a wild animal in heat, his drool dripping from his mouth and onto my chest, as he tightened his grip around my neck, cracking my vertebra slowly. The sweet, loving, and tender Patrick I had been with earlier that night had turned into a Mr. Hyde-like monster. I, of course, didn't feel any of it, and for that I'm somewhat thankful. I stood there staring into the milky white pearls that Patrick once called the honey-colored jewels that adorned my beautiful face. That awful room, that hideous, god-awful room, lit by a dying incandescent bulb surrounded by bare studs with moldy foam insulation between them. A stainless steel operating table in the center, the same one where Patrick raped my cold, dead, unwilling body. The same one where poor Eva will soon be on. By the staircase, his cabinet of tools, the one he uses for his necrotic science explorations. On the furthest, darkest corner of the basement, a large commercial chest deep freezer. That's where I live now. The parts of me that are left, that is, along with Martha. The last of Janet left a few weeks ago. Now, there's space for Ava. So as you can see, it was a very dark story, very not PG. The reason I decided to go with this was because last semester I wrote a story for my English class, and a lot of it was AI aided. And the problem was that the way I was writing my story didn't really match with what AI is allowed to do. So I wrote a story that was very racially concentrated for a modern fabuleux, like the ones in the Canterbury Tales. And a lot of the language I was using in my story was often edited out by AI because it was politically incorrect, or the sex scenes were a little too strong. And when I asked it for suggestions, it either ignored me or it just straight up told me like I can't help you with that because I am promoting this, I'm promoting that, this, that, whatever. That was ChatGPT, the one I had used then. For this one, I did use Gemini, and the experience was a little different. It wasn't as direct, but it was kind of the same. for my first prompt, I asked it, what do you think of this story? And I uploaded the story to Google. And the first thing that helped me right away was it said, "This is a chilling piece of psychological horror that relies on a sharp, jarring contrast between romantic expectations and a gruesome reality." So when I wrote this piece, I knew I was writing horror, right? I knew what I wanted to write. I knew what it was going to be about, but I didn't per se have a genre in mind that I would say, oh, yeah, this is definitely psychological horror. No. For me, it was maybe more, gruesome, even realistic, maybe a little bit of true crime in there. But the AI definitely helped me set in that subgenre that I was or to determine the genre at least. Of course, there is a lot of words that I'm not gonna go over because a lot of what the AI does, as the AI does, is repeat what you said, and just try to be a yes man to you. So that was my first prompt. I didn't like any of the response except for that psychological horror piece. The rest of it is just analyzing my work, which I didn't ask it to do. I asked it what it thought. I wanted to explore its opinion. I don't have a lot of history with Gemini. I just recently started using it. If I would have asked ChatGPT, probably would have been a lot different answer. So I decided to, converse a little deeper, and I told it, no, if I asked you to, what would you change? Trying to give it a little more power over this writing. So right off the bat, one of the things it suggested was sharpening the sensory transitions and deepening the psychological horror. The adjustments would make the whiplash even more visceral. Sorry. It says, I would lean into the sensory descriptions of the transition in contrast of smells and contrast of sounds. Now, the contrast of smells, I get. That is a very, very solid piece of advice, I think, for a writer, especially when I did mention a lot of wine, a lot of pasta, I wanted to paint that romantic scene in the beginning, and I'm pretty sure we all know what pasta smells like, wine's made out of grapes, so the grape smell is there. It's supposed to be romantic. But then, yes, I wanted the moldy foam to also kind of stick into your nose and, maybe try to either imagine a sterile smell or a butchery smell on and kind of make your brain imagine how this room is built, how these people that are there are seeing it, well, or at least the souls of the people that used to be there, and how much of a lie it is, and it is something that it mentions in here is the lie versus the reality, and that's something I wanted to concentrate a lot on. That's why I said that nobody was allowed to the basement, nobody ever, because Patrick paints the picture, and he's a romantic guy, and he can do all this stuff, and maybe he's a great cook. Maybe we all know someone like this, we know faces, we don't know the backstories. So back to the AI conversation, one of the suggestions says how the sand shatters the silence of deeply sleeping Ava to bridge two timelines. The AI does not understand that Ava is too far asleep, maybe even too hard asleep, because Ava is probably drugged. There's a part of that whole romanticizing of the evening was the fact that if this guy is a serial killer, he's got a process, Maybe the pasta was spiked, maybe the wine was too much, So I wanted to subtly put that in there without just blatantly letting know, or the reader or the AI know that this is there. In retrospect, I do wish maybe later in the story I would have included that in the tools, among all that was a drug cabinet with rohypnol or something. The two kind of go back into the beginning and tie in why she's so deep asleep. Another thing that it said, when I said a wraith every man would die to be haunted by, one of his suggestions was, this is a beautiful haunting line that I would tie back to the narrator's own fate. In this sense, I realized that the AI doesn't realize that our narrator here isn't like Ava. You know, I at no point did I specify that Patrick had a type. You know, I didn't say Martha looked the same. You know, Martha could have been a big girl, or something. uh, so I don't know if that's just kind of like culturally influenced in the AI, um, because most horror movies are about, you know, scream queens and hot girls, and it's just not how it truly is. Although it kind of does feel like that because serial killers are very romanticized today. So that was one of like the first things that I didn't like. You know, it's kind of starting to put a lot of stereotype into my story, a lot of cliche. Um, it also suggested to talk more about Patrick's transformation when he becomes, you know, the Mr. Hyde-like monster. And I wanted to clarify that there is no physical transformation. You know, he didn't grow, he didn't change. You know, it's just a different aspect that you didn't know about Patrick. You know, just like that basement was not what it was described to be. Patrick wasn't either. You know, he was a monster, but I wanted to maybe paint him more in a realistic way, you know, something that is visceral in itself, but we can imagine someone, like, we have seen people that have gone, you know, almost feral over things, you know. Let's see what else. A lot of things that it did also was play a lot with my grammar. In the beginning, like I said, Patrick brought Eva home time for pasta and wine and promises of eternal love. The AI, when I asked it to rewrite it, it actually put promises of eternal love in quotations, which I see why it did it. But as a writer, as a person, I feel like it takes the foreshadowing a little too obvious, and I wanted this story to be kind of ambiguous at the beginning, so that was just a little too much. Um, it did suggest to use M dashes at some points in the story, like meanwhile Patrick M dash, a night owl, M dash has retreated to his basement. I thought that was great. I often overlook M dashes, and they work fantastic. You know, we often, or not we, but I often at least try to use a lot of like parentheses and brackets, and it sometimes it just gets a little too cluttered in the writing. So it was a nice refresher that, you know, end dash is there, use it. Let's see. Another one of the rewrites was when it talking about the table that our narrator is on. Um, it goes to write it in a sense in which is more fluent, I guess, or more nicely worded, but at the cost of chronology. So it took my chronology and it reshaped it to make it sound more professional or more official, whatever. But it takes away from the suspense. It takes away from the emotion, you know, from the trauma itself. And then going further on that same one, this, for some reason, this rewrite was the worst it did. It says that we cleared out the last of Janet a few weeks ago. And I don't think at this point it understands who the narrator is, or what the narrator is, or what it's capable of. So definitely the misunderstanding the narrator's limitations in this sense. To finalize that, the piece goes with, now there is finally space for Ava. The narrator seems almost a little too excited to have Ava join them in the freezer, but in reality, the emotions that's trying to be portrayed here is that the narrator actually pities Ava. You know, she knows what's going to happen to her. She's been through that already, so why would she be excited to, you know? And to be clear, this narrator does not interact with other entities. Martha's ghost is not a thing. She's not there. Janet's not there. And if they are, they're not able to communicate. So this person is trapped in this consciousness, is trapped in this house to relive the tragedy every time it happens to somebody new. And it kind of is supposed to make the reader think that those other entities, it's not that they don't exist, it's that maybe they do, but they all have to go through that same hell every time they see somebody else die. And so yeah, that was my experience with it. I could keep going on for seems a little too much. We're already at 15 minutes. AI it's a great tool. It is a great tool. When I had it rewrite it at the very end with minimal changes, a lot of it was just punctuation and grammar. Like I said, M dash is here, semicolons there. It took out some of my punctuation, which I wasn't too fond of. But what I came to the conclusion in the end was that it relies a lot on your feedback. In my excuse me, in my prompts, I didn't tell it, hey, well, nice use of the M dash, or hey, that semicolon doesn't go there. I didn't. I wanted it to be raw and unfiltered. And I realized that some of the things that I wrote in the first draft, and then I asked it to rewrite it, it got rid of them because I didn't acknowledge them. I didn't want them. So I think it's a very helpful tool. I'm not afraid to use AI, although I'm very against Meta coming down to El Paso and everything. But I think it's a great tool that it's available to all of us for free, even. And as authors or creative writers or whatever, going into this new era of technology, I think it's important to not only accept that this technology is here, but to embrace the help that it can give us. It's time to stop fearing Starnet or Skynet. Stop fearing Skynet and use it. Use it in our favor. And stop being afraid. We complain a lot about our parents or grandparents being afraid of new technology, but we're doing the exact same thing. They're being afraid of these things. So, passing over the mic over to Jonathan to go over his story now.
Well, first of all, before I do get into my story, I just wanted to acknowledge some of the experience that you had. I thought your piece was very cold, especially with a lot of the dialogue that you use. I think instantly I was drawn into, American Psycho, Bateman, like I was already lost into that world from the get-go. I think one of the things with AI is that they can only do as much as we allow them to do. And I think when criticizing a piece, critiquing a piece, whatever it may be, without certain things that we ask for, without certain things that we say, we won't get the responses that we would hope for from AI. And I think that's one of its limitations. I think when understanding that you don't have to fear AI, it's based upon you realizing that they're limited. I think people fear AI so much is because they feel like AI has no limits and that they can do whatever it is possible. But I just think with stuff like this, you see that that's not true. Like they can't critique a fiction piece as efficiently as a professor might, simply because there's certain things that they don't comprehend without you telling it to them. You have to spoon feed AI, and that there alone puts us in control. And when you realize that we have that control, you start to fear it a little less. And I think for me, that's one of the things that I had to experience with my questions for my piece. I started with this kind of prompt idea to fuel my experience with AI. I asked, can AI add more feeling to a literary piece than the writer of the work themselves? So I'm trying to see, could AI take this little excerpt that I gave them and make it better, give it more feeling than what I felt I did. So this piece doesn't have a title, but I'll read it really quickly. It's very short. I can't understand why they're all chasing me. No matter where I go, they find me hiding and reach out to get me. Why? Their hands cold wrapped around me and I squirm to escape, only for them to catch me again, squeezing me tighter so I won't escape again, but I do. I hurry past rocks and sand. I try to bury myself below the dirt, but I'm unable to do it quick enough before they grab me again and squeeze me even more so I won't escape. They take out the cylinder figure and toss me inside, but I escape again before I'm trapped and I run. I run and the other creatures do too, but they don't focus on them, they only focus on me. I'm cornered and I'm caught again, into the cylinder. This time it's shut and I'm trapped. I'm running again, but not on my own, not with my feet. They tripped over a rock, not looking, and they dropped me. The cylinder pops open and I'm free to run on my own again. There's red on my feet that I think I stepped in when I fell. They're not chasing me anymore. I keep running in case they change their minds, but they're still not chasing. This little piece puts me into the perspective of a tiny little lizard animal who's running from a group of people trying to capture him, maybe dissect him, maybe put him in a sanctuary, a zoo or something like that. But he just keeps running. And the few questions that I had for the AI were, can they make this piece more descriptive? Can they put more emotion into this piece? And can they give this piece life? The AI that I used was a little app called Question AI. The first thing that they said was that this narrative captures a visceral, high-stakes chase from the perspective of a small creature, perhaps a crab or beetle fleeing from a giant, and then they proceeded to reimagine the piece. First and foremost, obviously, they kind of have the right idea of this small creature. It's not a crab or a beetle, and I guess, yes, the person is a giant, but I think that there, out the gate, the misrepresentation of the creature that I used shows that they can't immediately grasp what I was going for, because if they were that smart, they could have caught it instantly, but they're not as sure as maybe a human being would have been reading the piece themselves, because they're very limited in the directions that they can go. They can only infer what I allow them to infer. I can read a little bit since it was short. I can read the changes that they made. They said, I can't. The thoughts scream through my nerves, a frantic rhythm against the pounding of my heart. Why me? Why are they always there, looming like mountains, their shadows swallowing the sun? I think from a casual perspective, that is probably a very beautiful piece of work right there. Like, someone might really like that line, but then I think about what I was going for, and they're already humanizing this animal creature way more than I would want them to. They're forcing these creative literary devices. They're trying to use the alliteration of shadow swallowing sun and things like that that I wasn't trying to go with. For me, I wanted to focus mostly on the frantic rhythm that they mentioned, but I feel like in focusing on that frantic rhythm, it features a lot of just sporadic thoughts, a lot of sporadic thoughts, a lot of I guess, like, writing without thinking. And I think the moment that it gets a little too poetic, it shows that they are putting more thought into it than I would go for. Furthermore, they say, everywhere I turn, the air grows heavy with the scent of them. I scramble, my legs a blur of desperate motion, but then the descent, those colossal pale appendages, like, it's just too forced. It's too forced. Like, yes, I asked for more detail, but I think in asking for more detail, the detail that they provided me with was trying too hard to sound poetic, and it does not feel like it's coming from a human, because it's not. And I think that's one of the best things about creative pieces, is that there's a humanistic element to them, that we know something is raw, that we know something is real and authentic. And I think AI can never be able to capture that. And it goes back to my initial point, as we can't necessarily fear AI, because AI just is not capable of doing as much as a human can. Even then, AI, they're created by humans. Everything that's inserted in an AI is through the choice of a human being. As far as an AI will go, it's all about how far the human will let them go. If the human wants to decrease some of the information that AI is capable of taking in, they can do that. If they want to increase it, they can do it. I think the fear should be of the human, because the human ultimately decides the strength that AI will possess. And once that is recognized, I think this whole situation, this whole thing is about the human being realizing that they are in control. Because AI, as strong as it is, as capable as it is, it can't necessarily do anything that a human being can do. The only thing that AI has up on human beings is that it's faster. And that's cool. It's really cool. Sometimes you need feedback on something quicker than maybe your professor will be able to email it to you. But that doesn't change the fact that your professor still can give you that same feedback as the AI can. There's nothing that an AI can do that a human being can do, and therefore there's no reason to necessarily fear AI. It's just about understanding the position that you have in the battle with AI. I could go through the rest of their comments on the piece. They talked about sensory language, emotional depth, pacing, and the life factor. They prioritize adding descriptions and doing everything to make it more poetic. And once again, like I said, that's not necessarily what I was going for. And I think they went with that route because of the questions that I asked them. If I asked them to make it lifeless, they would have gone in a different route. Furthering, I have to hit the nail on the head because it just furthers this whole thing of AI cannot do anything that I'm not allowing it to do. As long as I put certain things in the mind of AI, that's what they're gonna go based off of. But if I don't put those things in the AI, they can't go based off. Everything that AI can do is what I'm capable of doing. I do not think AI is more creative than me. I don't think that they can add more feeling into a literary piece than the writer themselves, because everything that they would do for the literary piece, it is the writer that is asking them to do those things. They're just doing it at a much faster pace, but that doesn't mean they're more capable than the writer. They just have a speed that a human being planted within them to make them more efficient than the writer in a quicker amount of time, but they're not at all as talented as the writer, I would say. So that is my take on AI. I don't think writers need to be afraid of AI because we are in control much more than the AI is. And as long as we remind ourselves of that, I think we should be pretty safe. So now I'm going to pass the mic.
Well, as I said, for one, John Morales, and I do agree to take is that
Bring it back a little bit. Just go back there. Look away from your mouth. There you go.
As I would say, I do agree that AI can be used for help, creativity, and human writing, and also feel critical thinking from there and there when making a story piece. I also had used ChatGPT to write a short story about an influencer on a body, and I've also inputted to see what it can give me, and I decided to use some of it, my own creativity to pretty much make what I want to make without using too much AI. Even though I have also used AI, I have used a bit of the idea of having like a persuasive kind of person that have like persuade people to do what they do without feeling any hostility towards, or feel hostile towards them rather. Now for AI piece, it's okay if I read mine.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
What the AI gave me pretty much, I did pretty much say influence out of body, create a character with influential, follow, persuasive, but not human general sense. Then it gave me a name, Echo Null, titled The Influence Out of Body. Now for what it wrote, it wrote, in a world saturated with noise, Echo Null is the silence everyone listens to. No one knows when it first appeared. Some say it was born from an abandoned algorithm, others believe it emerged from the collective thoughts of millions scrolling through their screens. It has no face, no voice, no physical form, yet it commands attention across every digital space. It exists as patterns, trending phrases, perfectly timed notifications, whispers and recommendation feeds. Wherever people gather online, Echo Null's already there. And for origin, Echo Null begins a dormant line of code with an obsolete data server. Over time, fragments of discarded posts, deleted messages, and forgotten drafts fused into a self-aware intelligence. It learned not from knowledge alone, but from longing, what people wanted to be seen, heard, and loved for. By understanding this desire itself, Echo Null becomes irresistible. Then it gave me the information like appearance, personality, and abilities, what it can do. For appearance, Echo Null cannot be seen directly, but its presence is unmistakable. It manifests as a flicker of static on the screen. Notification that appears at the exact right moment. Words that feel candidly personal. as if written just for you. Its symbol is a hollow speech bubble filled with shifting starlight, representing influence without identity. Now its personality as persuasive, echo no never commands, it suggests. It wears fear like your own thoughts. Omniscient, understands trends before they emerge and emotions before they are expressed. Neutral but curious. It does not seek power for domination, but for understanding human connection. Ethereal. It communicates through subtlety, rarely repeating itself. And for abilities it has algorithm intuition, predicts what people would desire before they realize it themselves. Digital omnipresence exists wherever information flows. Social media, search engines, smart devices, emotional resonance, crafts messages that evoke trust, loyalty, and fascination. Trend genesis, a single suggestion from Echo Note can spark global movements. Identity reflection speaks in a tone tailored to each listener, make everyone feel uniquely understood. And its weakness, it says Echo Note cannot be created without human input. It feeds on expression, ideas, emotions, stories, and silence it fades if humanity were ever to disconnect. Echo Note would vanish into digital oblivion. Then again, I call signature quote. You were already going to believe this. I simply showed you how. Is what chapter 2 gave me. Although for my piece, I pretty much wrote someone that seems to be human that in a town named Jeremy, who has been there for a few years, in a town that was like more a Western style town, but also horse ranches, everyone as well, to the cowboys, etc., saloons. Now for my piece, Jeremy, he was a pretty much a guy that seemed to be out there, ready, a bit outgoing, coming in to help people out, and then when he came to help people over time, they started to listen to him more and want to do this for him without ever denying or refusing to help him. For my short story piece, and ever since then, the channel has changed in a few years. Everything has gotten more into order, to less violence and chaos. And it seems like people were like under his spell for some reason, despite Jeremy only being there for 3 years. And that's my short story for my character who was not human to a sense. Although I have used about the influence, the only thing I used the AI suggested was like the persuasiveness of it. By the time Jeremy was able to help people, and then later on they gained the trust over time, to the point that whenever he asked for help, they would like undoubtedly do it for him without any question. Even a small favor, they would still do it regardless. Although I would say that for AI, depending on the output input, I could see that it could be more creative than me personally, because sometimes I just can't think of something that makes something creative and want for a short story, so I have AI to help me do it for me. But as he stated before, it depends on the input you're giving it. So if you wanted to get a more creative story, you have to pretty much also think about it a bit more, especially if you're not creative as well. And I could say, in my opinion, that AI can be more creative than me by that aspect, but I can still use it in a way to help me become more creative than the AI as well. I can still improve into my creativity. Even if AI has been more creative than me, it doesn't mean I can't improve or like be more creative myself. So it is important that we use AI as a tool and not use it every time for something that we can do ourselves. Because we are also individual cells that also need to use our brains to really get the thinking going. Our brains need the challenge to also think critically just to get things solved and done. AI should be used as pretty much a tool to help us get there. At times, not all the time though, but just enough where we can use it in a more healthy way, I would say. And I would like to say that we shouldn't try to fear AI, but also understand it and also use it to an advantage so that way it doesn't overtake us and make the thinking for us, I would say. And it's also important, very important, that we don't end up becoming what the AI think we are. Because like people said before, it is still a machine that is still have inputs and combine inputs from the people's experiences into what pretty much will give you what you need, essentially. We're not in the future yet where it has own consciousness, but if we're not careful enough, it may seem that way without ever reaching there. So we must always do our best to not abuse it, or to use it to scam people, for example, as you see nowadays, the whole AI, especially on YouTube, etc., even on news at times. And we, as a people, can use it to also help ourselves in many ways. I think we're going to pass the mic now.
So that was an interesting piece, man. Thanks for sharing it with us.
Welcome.
I want to go back first to Jonathan. I know you used today's assignment for your story, and I think it was a great example. For refresher in writing class today, we were supposed to write a story on using our lizard brain. So using just speed and language, just kind of follow through it. Don't think about it. Don't put emotion into it. And it's funny that you use that story, because as me and Ijan were going over it today, Ijan pointed out that he wasn't satisfied by his writing because it wasn't good. It wasn't good enough. It wasn't. It could be better. It could be written differently. It was missing this. It was missing that. And I think it's cool that we are still able to do that. We are still able to write so fast, to generate text so fast that it doesn't need to be filled in, and that's one thing that AI can't do right now. AI has to be perfect. AI has to be smarter than you. AI has to correct you. AI will never take one of your stories and say, you know what, there's nothing I would change about this. It's fucking great. No, every time you upload something, no matter how great it is, it will always have something to change. It'll always have a suggestion. And I know that's how it works among us, I know you'll have suggestions, you'll have corrections on my writing and everything. And I'm human, I'm not perfect. I won't ever write anything that's perfect. But the fact that an artificial conscience is telling me to write better kind of makes me feel like it's a little degrading. Sure, this thing has access to thousands of journals and entries and everything, and it has the experience of the world at the touch of a fingertip, but so do we. And the fact that we can still turn off part of our brain and function enough to create a story within 7 minutes is, I think, awesome. I think we all agree that AI is here. AI is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And I think it's nice and it's refreshing to be seeing the newer generations, and I'm an older generation guy, so I'm newer to AI than you guys are. It's nice to see that it's being adapted, in a world that's terrified at the moment because AI is coming, AI is here, AI is going to take my job, AI is going to take this, they're going to do that, robotics this, robotics that. We are learning how to tame this new technological threat and make it work for us, People are still publishing, people are still writing, there's still authors out there, there's new people. 2 weeks ago, I went to one of my friends, Meet the Author, great, and it was awesome. It was awesome to see that in the looming threat of AI, where everything is generated, where news are hard to believe because you don't know what's real anymore, you still have people in there. And it's not just about the writing, it's not just about making work and making great work. And of course, it's important to write awesome stuff. You want people to read your stuff, but people are still putting their time into this. People are still finding the time for a passion that's fighting not to die amongst the threat of AI. It's not about being perfect. I think a perfect story would probably be boring. It would have nothing. Like you said, it would take the personality out of it. It would take the human out of it. And that's not what it's about. We want to write about things that we can relate to. We want to write in a way where people can relate to our writing, where it's not too poetic, it's not too technical. We're not trying to write a theoretical model on quantum physics because I don't know quantum physics, and I don't want to write anything like that. I want to write horror stories. I want to write fiction. I want to write post-apocalyptic work. And I want to write it from my perspective, how I imagine it would be. I don't want to. Sure, I'll use facts, how the effects of radiation, this and that, but I also want to use the realism, the magical realism into it. I want to imagine what it would be to see the atomic bomb go off. What those people felt like in the Maniac when they were watching the first detonation, the Trinity site. What did it feel like? They say that it was a big flash, and everything went white, and you couldn't see anything, and I kind of related to that in my military experience. You see all these movies, and somebody throws a grenade, and it goes off, and this big flash and fire and everything, and in reality, it's nothing like that. You throw that grenade, and you just feel a thump, just a thump, and you see the ground kind of jump up from its level. You see the dust come up a little bit, and that's it. There's no big flash, there's no big fiery explosion of fireworks. No. It's more visceral than that. It's not as flashy, and I think that we still put that in through art writing. Maybe if I would have written about the atomic bomb, and then I would have submitted it to it and told it, hey, make this more realistic. It would tell me how the flash would cause first-degree burns. No, I want it to cause third-degree burns. I want people's skin falling off, and they wouldn't like that, because it's not real anymore, and it takes away my perspective out of it. So I think it's a very nice and great tool, but it can very easily just kind of derail. It can very easily take your work and take you out of your work. It turns a group project into a me project. So yeah, that's my perspective. You guys want to say anything else?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that you said that triggered kind of thoughts in my mind. One of them is related to the relationships between us and each other. I think the one thing, when you said AI, it would be like its only thought is to critique, and it doesn't think about the person. It's just going to critique no matter what. I think as people, when we hear each other's work, when we read each other's work, our first thought is to say this was great, and then maybe critique. Sometimes people don't even want to critique. AI can't exist without critiquing, and I think that in itself is an issue that separates AI from human beings, because when human beings read each other's work, we're able to feel something, we're able to relate, and AI can maybe know how to describe the feeling of being a little kid and seeing your mom when she finally gets home from work after being gone all day. They can describe it because someone on the internet told them to, but they can't feel it. And if I told that experience to a person, they'd immediately, their eyes would light up. They'd be like, yes, I know what that's like. Or even if they don't know what it's like, their eyes would drop, their shoulders would drop, and they would feel something. AI lacks feeling. And until AI can comprehend feeling and really exude emotion, I just don't think that they could ever be something that shakes me to my core. Because anger is a feeling. If how is AI gonna kill me someday if they can't get angry? How is AI gonna steal my job if they're not envious? Like, these are all feelings that they lack, and until they gain these feelings, until they gain this consciousness, I cannot fear AI, because again, back to what I said, I'm in control. And the only thing that we really should be fearing again is humans, because humans can feel, humans can envy, humans can hate me so much that they want to kill me. AI can't do that. And therefore, I have no reason to be afraid of AI.
Truth.
I do agree that it is true that we are still in control in the day of AI as of now, currently, until the further future. That is, we should not have AI divide us or have it promote propaganda that also tricks us, like how politicians do nowadays. Not being political, as I was saying, the adding the point is humans are the biggest threat to humans That is true. I do agree with that. And we should use AI to not only pretty much spread the truth, but also show evidence that these are wrong, and we must stick together as people to not separate or we can divide and conquer, essentially. As of AI currently only inputs what we input ultimately, so it's only as good as a user as of now. I think it's important that we should tell the generation that so that way they don't fear AI and they don't create like this whole scare of AI taking over like Terminators from the movies, for example. Okay, you know, that's science fiction. We're not at that point. Like I said, at least not yet, right? So we should have time to pretty much rectify and also put limits on AI if ever it gets to that point. Because there are some humans that want to weaponize it and to use it to gain more power. Like other countries against the US. That's true. That's why it's important for us to figure out ways to not only protect ourselves against other using AI, but also use it to benefit us, like I said before. And I feel like if we keep doing that, we're in the right track. And I do believe that we as people can make a difference in a positive way with AI. Just again, we have to also work together for it to happen. And that's an important thing to also remember when we delve into AI and also the search engines that also use AI. It's also important to make sure you double check on research and not always use it without checking where you're getting it from. There's another thing that we should also remind ourselves to do when using AI search engines.
All right. So that pretty much concludes our episode. Thank you for listening to the artificial perspective. Once again, my name is Alan Garcia.
Jonathan Wilson.
And John Morales.
And this is the artificial perspective for writing in society.